Hello friends, how are you all? Today we are going to discuss the grade 5 U.A.E Social Studies lesson 10 Early People of Central and South America. Answer the following questions. Who were the Aztecs? Answer. The Aztecs were a group of powerful people who first settled in the Valley of Mexico in the 14th century. They had the reputation of being fierce fighters. What was the Aztec civilization based in? Answer. The Aztec civilization was based on farming. Hence, most of the people were farmers who worked hard. The men of Aztec civilization worked as craftsmen and warriors, whereas the women cared for their families at home. According to the Aztec law, the children were required to attend schools. This is the map of the Aztec Empire. Where was the Aztec civilization located and when was it established? Answer. The Aztec civilization was located in the Valley of Mexico in the 14th century. The Valley of Mexico was first settled by migrating tribes Chichimex, Tepanex, Mexica and Acohua. It was established in the year 1428 under their leader Itzcotl. What were some of the items produced by the Aztecs? Answer. Some of the items produced by the Aztecs were greenstone, turquoise, cotton, maize, cocoa beans, chilies and gold. Which of the items discovered in the Aztec civilization do we use today? Answer. Few items that were discovered in the Aztec civilization that we use today are as follows: chocolate from cocoa beans, medicine, chewing gum, calendar, mathematics, etc. Which products do you think were considered the most valuable to the Spanish? Answer. The products that were considered the most valuable to the Spanish were as follows: greenstone, turquoise, cotton, maize, cocoa beans, chilies and gold. What happened to the Aztec after contact with the European explorers? Why did that happen? Answer. The Aztec people started falling ill and dying after getting into contact with the European explorers. It happened because the European explorers brought in many diseases to the New World. This in turn brought in more death in Aztec civilization than that of the weapons. The Aztec civilization built pyramids in their cities. What other famous early civilization built pyramids? Answer. The other famous early civilization which built pyramids were the ancient Egyptians. This is the pyramid in ancient Egypt and this is the pyramid in Aztec civilization. Compare and contrast the similarities and differences in Aztec and Egyptian civilization. Similarities. The Aztecs had an agricultural calendar and a sacred calendar, much like the Egyptians. Both stress the importance of knowing the seasonal cycles for planting and harvesting, which is probably why even with the huge gap in time that they were apart, they were able to make two calendars so similar to each other. Egyptians and Aztecs had slaves. Differences. In the Aztec civilization, many slaves were allowed to own their own properties, such as houses and farming land. This is majorly opposite for the Egyptian side because slaves had barely any rights. Aztec slave life was much different than the Egyptian slave life. The Aztec slaves were allowed to marry non-slaves, whereas the Egyptian slaves were not allowed to marry non-slaves and they were allowed to marry only other slaves. How do you think two civilizations living on opposite sides of an ocean ended up with similar structures? Explain your theories. Answer. I think two civilizations living on opposite sides of an ocean ended up with similar structures because both were agricultural societies which need to have detailed knowledge of farming, when to make the fields ready, when to plant their crops, and when to do the harvest, etc. In both civilizations, slaves were used to work. Medicines were used in both civilizations. Education was given importance in both civilizations, etc. Identify the time period in which the Aztec Empire flourished. Answer. The Aztec Empire flourished between 1345 CE and 1521 CE in Mesoamerica. What was the main occupation of the Aztec people? Answer. The main occupation of the Aztec people were farming. How do you understand that the Aztec people cared for their children's education? Answer. I understood that the Aztec people cared for their children's education because, according to the Aztec law, children were required to attend the school.